want to say a few words about A Complete Unknown, which I've only seen once at this point, but it has been haunting my thoughts for the past, whatever it is, 2 weeks since I've seen it. I was not really, I'd kind of forgotten that it was coming. I do remember seeing somewhere that James Mangold had a Bob Dylan biopic coming up, but I had kind of forgotten about it. And I think one of the reasons why I'd kind of, scratched it out of my memory is because I'd read that Timothée Chalamet was playing Bob Dylan. And I not that I disliked Timothée Chalamet. I do think that he was really great in Dune. I didn't see Wonka, so I can't really speak to it, but I saw the trailer. The trailer for Wonka looked horrible as far as I'm concerned. It looked completely pointless, and I just didn't understand why they had to make that movie. So I was just getting a little annoyed seeing, oh, here's Timothée Chalamet again in another pointless role. And then I saw a clip that they put out from the movie, from a Complete Unknown, and it's a scene where Bob Dylan and Joan Baez are in Dylan's apartment, and they're singing "Blowing in the Wind" together. And they sang it well, and I did acknowledge that when I saw the scene, but I thought at the time that his dialogue, his line delivery seemed a little too seemed unnatural. It seemed like, "Hey, I'm Bob Dylan," it seemed like he was kind of putting on, like trying too hard to put on a Dylan impersonation. So I was like, well, I don't know. But then I kept seeing these really positive reviews coming out for it. So I figured, you know what? Maybe I should go see this movie. And after I had bought my tickets, I saw that Tony Visconti, whom I follow on Facebook, a legendary producer, most famous for the work he did with David Bowie, also Thin Lizzy, and a bunch of other people, he was raving about it. He had just seen it. So I was like, wow, that's saying something, because Tony's, I don't know him personally, but I've been following him on social media for quite a while. He's not an easy person to impress. He's very opinionated and very, very outspoken about his opinions, which I really, really admire about him. So the fact that he was showering praise on this film was noteworthy. So then I was really looking forward to it. And yeah, it's an amazing film. And I am not even exaggerating at all that I think that this movie, it's more than a great biopic. It's more than a great film about a famous musician. This is a film that I think is going to change lives. I think very similar in a way that Stop Making Sense by Talking Heads changed my life when I saw it in 1985 when I was 16 years old. I'm 55 now. I've been playing guitar and playing bass. I've been in a band called Blaggers for 20 years now. I've made music my life because of that movie that changed my life back in 1985. And this is a movie that really, it's been such a long time since I've seen a movie that really made me want to go home and write music. And it just this movie made me feel like a teenager again. It made me feel like what it felt like to be that age where I was just kind of discovering this creative force, this creative fever in my brain, and the joy of discovery and creation. Because that's essentially what the movie is about. And it's amazing. It's amazing what they've achieved. And I think one of the reasons why it has such a powerful it's having such a powerful impact on people like me and almost everybody's seen it as far as I've been able to tell so far, is that, for one thing anyway, all of the actors who are playing the musicians in the film, that's Timothée Chalamet as Bob, that's Edward Norton as Pete Seeger, Monica Barbaro as Joan Baez. If I'm pronouncing any of these names wrong, please let me know. I hate it when people mispronounce names on YouTube, so I may be guilty of that here. And Boyd Holbrook as Johnny Cash. All of them were actually singing live to camera, as far as I know. I don't know if there are any exceptions at all, but at least from what I've been able to gather, from interviews I've seen with James Mangold, the director, that it's pretty much all sung live on set, and they were actually playing their instruments as well. They did go to great lengths to pre-record all these songs ahead of time, but when it came down to actually filming the scenes, they realized it was just going to go much better if they just did it live. And I think that has a lot to do with why it works so damn well, because it really feels like it's happening, because it is happening on the camera in the scene. And they also went to tremendous lengths, the set direction and what they did to recreate Greenwich Village in the early 1960s. They went on location in Hoboken, New Jersey, I believe, where the streets there had been less gentrified than the actual Greenwich Village streets. So they were able to recreate this corner of, I think it's McDougal Street. Is it McDougal Street? I'm forgetting now. Where Cafe Wa still is, actually. And they rebuilt and recreated all the restaurants and shops that happened to be in the area at the time. And they did extensive research too to kind of recreate Bob Dylan's apartment that he had at the time, doing impeccable research to, like, down to every last detail of the things that he owned at the time and little knickknacks that he would have had. A table that apparently he had built himself, they had recreated for this set. I mean, just crazy attention to the detail that I wouldn't have known. I'm not enough of a Dylanologist. I'm not a Dylanologist, but I'm not enough of a Dylan freak to have caught all those things. But it did definitely added to the authentic feeling that everything that was happening in this movie. Now the really only, I think, the holes that you can poke in it, if you really wanted to do that, it is not 100% historically accurate, but that's also kind of by design. I mean, most historical, biographical or historical period pieces, or actual movies about actual historical events, are usually not 100% accurate, because in order to tell a story in a Hollywood movie, you've kind of got you almost always they wind up compressing and conflating events. So you have a scene where there are things that actually happen in history, but they're all happening in one room in one conversation instead of over a span of days or weeks, that sort of thing. That happens in this movie. And one of the things that has been maybe a little bit controversial is something that I'm not going to spoil it. I'm not going to spoil it. Many of you have probably seen other people talking about this, so you know what I'm going to say anyway. There's something that happens towards the end of the movie that did happen, but didn't happen where the film shows it happening. Things like that. And it really doesn't matter. And part of this, as a good friend of mine pointed out, that a lot of the inaccuracies are more of an actual feature of the movie and not a bug, because that really is how Dylan kind of preferred to present himself anyway, that he is known for being very mysterious and enigmatic. Not really that he was, I think, not because he wanted to be confusing and weird. It's just that he didn't see the point in explaining himself to everybody. You can see this time and time again in his early interviews from the 1960s that he did at the time. When people asked too many probing questions about what his songs meant, or who they were written about, or what they mean, or what the message is in the songs, he always fought against those types of questions, because he really seemed to dislike deconstructing art. He just wanted the art to be what it was, and like exist as it is and be received as it is for everybody who listens to it. And he didn't want to explain it to people, because in a way, I think that kind of destroys the magic. And in a way, I think that's kind of how the film presents Dylan, is like, it doesn't try to explain him. It just shows you how he was at the time. And that's it. There's not a scene where you say, this is why I am the way I am. It doesn't do that. It doesn't do that. In fact, it doesn't even shy away from the fact that Dylan had a penchant for being kind of a dick. Sometimes he could be insensitive and kind of an asshole. And that actually is one of the lines of dialogue in the film. And the other really magical thing about this, which is also, it's remarkable for a couple of reasons. Mangold actually met with Dylan several times for these many hours long conversations where they went over the script. And at one point, Dylan actually sat with James Mangold, read through the entire script, where Dylan was reading his own parts in the film, and while James was reading all the other bits and the scene descriptions and stuff. And Dylan was writing notes on the script as he went along, and he made dialogue suggestions. There are actually some lines of dialogue in the film that Bob Dylan wrote himself. I can't tell you what they are, but I'm sure at some point hopefully we'll find out, what bits he wrote. Also, and if anybody has an answer for this, let me know. Or if you have a theory for what the answer to this question is, please let me know in the comments. But it's been reported in several different publications, including the Rolling Stone, that on one of these occasions where where James Mangold was meeting with Dylan, Dylan really wanted him to to add a scene that was completely historically inaccurate, meaning it was something that never happened. And when James kind of fought against him a little bit, saying, well, he expressed concern about what people might think about putting this historically inaccurate thing in the film, Dylan shot back, so what do you care what people think? And that is so Dylan. That is so Bob. And nobody, apparently, I think this story came from Edward Norton. And I could be wrong about this because I haven't actually, I've read it in a couple of places, but the story is different depending on which article you read or which interview you watch. But I think it might be the case that only James and Bob at this point, or at least to my knowledge right now, James Mangold and Bob Dylan are the only two people who know which scene it is for sure. So there's plenty of theories out there. There are several scenes in the movie which are known to be made up. I mean, they're not. There's a couple of scenes which aren't even conflated things of things we know happened. They're just completely fictional and thrown in there to add color and flavor to the film. And I don't have a problem with any of those things. There was, and I like I say, I'm not the biggest Dylan historian, but there were things that as I was watching it, that I was going, oh, that's probably not how that happened, or that person probably wasn't there when he went and did this. But it doesn't matter. I think it actually makes the film better because it just feels so real. And it's like you're kind of looking through a prism, like a time travel prism back to the 1960s. So this is me in the middle of editing, and I just realized that I failed to elaborate on something that I said. The fact that James Mangold met with Bob Dylan to go over the script is remarkable for two reasons. I mean, one of them, really obviously, the fact that Bob did take such an intimate interest in this film at all is pretty amazing for somebody like him anyway. And really the only reason it happened, not the only reason, but there was an opportunity, a window opened because of the pandemic. The film was originally going to be starting production in 2020. And of course, that all got thrown out the window because we all know what happened that year. But it also gave Bob time off because all his tour dates were canceled. So he talked to his management team and said, hey, send me the script that you guys are so worried about. Because and until this point, James had been dealing with his management team, and they were, I don't know how difficult they were being, but they were definitely giving him a little bit of pushback and being a little bit, suspicious and trying to protect Bob's privacy and his own personal interests and stuff, which is understandable, right? So Bob had all this time on his hands to say, let me see the script. That in and of itself is amazing. The other amazing thing is that Bob did not he didn't really interfere with what James had already written, or what had James in his I forget who actually wrote the screenplay. I think James co-wrote it with somebody. Forgive me for not having the details right. He didn't really interfere with anything that they were trying to do. He just enhanced it. He enhanced it. That's what's amazing. Usually when you have artists getting their hands in these types of productions, they wind up getting dumbed down or sanitized, because they don't want to be portrayed in a bad light. This film openly is very, very honest about the fact, like I said, that Bob Dylan could be an asshole. Bob didn't have any problem with that, apparently, because it's still in the script. And that's incredible. That really is incredible. That is one of the things that makes this movie such a treasure. And here's my concern, and it's not really about the film, it's about where Hollywood is going from here forward. Because I really do think that this is quite possibly, not only this, I think that this is James Mangold's masterpiece. We'll see what he does after this, but I think I've seen several of his films. This is an amazing piece of work. This is coming from the same guy who directed Walk the Line, the biopic about Johnny Cash, which came out like 20 years ago. I believe in that one. It's been I've only saw that film once. I do remember liking it. I don't remember being knocked out by it, but I do believe that Joaquin sang and played guitar in that one too. But I didn't come away from that film feeling like my life had been had been revived and changed, Didn't have the same kind of magical impact on me that this one did, because it was a different kind of film, I think. This one, again, the Johnny Cash movie was more of telling a story of the struggles in his life. That's not what this movie is. This is about Bob and his craft. for him to be able to do what he really wanted to do, not why he wanted to do it, just him finding a way to do it. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's so impactful. But anyway, not only is this James Mangold's masterpiece, I believe, but I think that this is quite possibly the best biopic I've ever seen. Maybe the best one ever made. Because music biopics in general, really do suffer because they tend to over romanticize the whole thing about being a musician, about writing music. It tends to make it seem like it's like music is written in this fairyland, and when it happens, there's like, lights from the heaven shining down, and it gets a little ridiculous in a lot of these movies, and they tend to be hyper real or hyper unreal or much more fantastical than they are sincere, if that makes any sense. And we do have, that's why I say I think the bar has been raised now. It's the degree of authenticity in this film is remarkable. And here's what I'm concerned about is that there hasn't been a whole lot of press about this, but there are a series of 4 Beatles biopics that are in production now, or about to go in production. I think they've been cast already, directed by Sam Mendes, which are supposed to come out in a couple years, I believe. I'm worried about these movies now because I am highly skeptical that they're going to be able to live up to the example that A Complete Unknown has now established. Hollywood, like I say, the bar has been raised. Hollywood needs to rise to the occasion and actually learn something from this film. Is it always going to be possible to have the actor sing and play their instrument that of the person they're playing in the film? Probably not. I mean, Bob Dylan is one thing, but imagine like a biopic about Eddie Van Halen, or that would be a really tall order to find somebody who could play guitar like Eddie Van Halen and act. Maybe. So the Beatles, I would really love them to do something similar. I mean, I know it would be a huge challenge, but the thing is, they've already cast the roles for this film, and I don't think that they're musicians. So I know that's a tall order. You got to find an actor who can play bass like Paul, who can sing like Paul. It's almost like you're casting a Beatles tribute band. But so I'm a little worried about that, because I think if you've got a movie where they're pretending to play their instruments, or somebody else is singing and they're moving their mouth to somebody else's voice, that's going to hurt the film. That's why I think before this, the only other biopic that I really liked, which really wasn't even a biopic, it's more of a fictional imagining of an actual something that happened, but we don't really know how it went down. And that's the movie Two of Us, which was about this evening that John Lennon and Paul McCartney spent together in New York in the late 70s, and was, legend has it, I think the last time they actually saw each other. That really happened. However, it doesn't happen the way it happens in the film, but that doesn't matter. The film is not about them playing music, and it's not about their rise to fame or them performing it. There is one scene where they sing together, but obviously they don't sing a Beatles song. But it's nice. They're actually singing. They're actually sitting there. The two of the actors are sitting there singing together and just having a laugh. It's Jared Harris as John Lennon and Aidan Quinn as Paul McCartney, and they're both fantastic. It was great casting for those two roles. But the movie is just conversations, and it's also it just takes place on one day, in one evening, and that's it. And I think that's why it works so well. And I think because it avoided the cradle to grave cliche that music biopics and all biographical movies tend to fall victim to. And A Complete Unknown avoids that trap as well, because it's only focusing on 1961 to 1965. And yeah, I could babble on about this film forever. I've only seen it once now, and I want to see it again. Have you seen it? Please let me know what you think. I'm dying to talk about this film, as you can tell. And I think what I probably will do is, after I've seen it a second time, I'll come back and have a few follow-up thoughts as well. Anyway, thanks again for watching. My name is Chad Smalley. I play bass in a band called Blackguards, have done so for the past 20 years or so. You can check us out at blackguards.com. We also have a podcast called Slappercast, which comes out every Tuesday. It's here on YouTube and every other podcast place you can think of. I also have another show called Prodigious Saps, which is a pop culture show. that I do with my good friend Brendan Jones. And we're largely covering Superman right now at the time I'm recording this. All things Superman, but a lot of other stuff. We are also in all the different podcast places, but you can watch us right here on YouTube. And I hope to see you guys again very soon. Thanks again for watching, y'all. Bye.